Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to this exclusive masterclass titled Journalism and Mental Health in India, presented by the esteemed Dr. Aparna Joshi. We are delighted to have you with us today for what promises to be an insightful and enriching session. This masterclass is supported by UNFPA. My name is Pooja Nagdev, and I'm the Ladli coordinator at Population First. This initiative is brought to you by Population First, a social impact organization committed to addressing issues of gender inequality and social development. One of our flagship programs is Ladli, a gender sensitization campaign that works with various stakeholders, including media and advertising, to promote gender sensitive content and challenge harmful gender norms. Through Ladli, we aim to create inclusive spaces for dialogue and action around gender and mental health, especially in the context of journalism and communication. Sorry. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker, Dr. Aparna Joshi. Dr. Joshi is an academician, researcher, interventionist, practitioner, and trainer with over 25 years of experience in the field of mental health and psychosocial well-being. Since 2010, she has served as an assistant professor of applied psychology and mental health at the School of Human Ecology at Tata Institute of Social Science. Prior to joining TISS, Dr. Joshi contributed significantly to the mental health sector through her work with several leading national organizations, helping to develop innovative mental health initiatives. Her research interests span mental health and psychosocial interventions, couple and family therapy, gender and mental health, violence against women, and youth mental health. Her work is deeply rooted in the integration of theory and practice, and she continues to collaborate with both national and international partners. At TISS, she leads two major field action projects: iCall, a pioneering technology assisted mental health and psychosocial service, and Sukoon, an initiative focused on couple and family well being. We are truly honored to have the opportunity to learn from her today. Before we begin, I would like to make a few announcements. Kindly switch on your cameras if possible. We would love to see you. Please keep your microphones muted throughout the session to avoid any disruptions. If you have any questions during the masterclass, feel free to post them in the chat box. We will address all queries during the dedicated Q&A sessions at the end. During the Q&A, if you would like to ask your question directly, please use the raise hand feature and unmute yourself when invited to speak. Before we invite Dr. Joshi to begin her session, I would now like to call upon Dr. Shada, Trustee of Population First, to say a few words.
Thank you, Pooja. It's really an honor to have Aparna join us today for this masterclass. And the reason why we thought of this topic for the masterclass is we realized that mental health is emerging as a very important issue. There's a lot that is being said and on internet, on social media, everywhere, and by influencers also. There's a lot of conversation happening about mental health, but do we really have a good understanding or a proper understanding of mental health? What is mental health? What are the issues? So we need clarity on that. Second thing is that media plays a big role in creating awareness about mental health. Also, destigmatizing mental health, because a lot of times mental health issues are stigmatized, and then we really need well-informed media to write in a way that destigmatizes mental health. Thirdly, we realize, like I was talking to a journalist friend, and he said that while he covered the tsunami, he was so devastated mentally and emotionally that he could not work for many weeks altogether. He didn't feel like doing anything. He was almost on the verge of emotional and mental collapse, and that's when he decided to go for vipassana course, and then it took a lot of effort on his part to get back to normal. So covering violence, covering conflict, covering communal riots, covering natural disasters, covering uh, crimes, it's not easy, because if you're dealing with it on a day-to-day basis, how do you detach yourself? How do you distance yourself from those incidents is also very important. And I hope, and I'm sure Aparna will touch on all these points, and am I hope after this session most of you would take up stories related to mental health. And I'm sure Aparna will be always available to you. We'll share, I hope it is okay, we'll share her details, contact details with you so that if you are writing a story and if you need some clarification, you can talk to her. And I'm extremely happy to share with you that we are announcing a fellowship for journalists this year to write one story on mental health in the next 4 months. We'll be sharing the details in a day or two. So be prepared. You can be a fellow of Population First and write a story, investigative story on any mental health issue. So thank you so much for all of you for joining us, and a very, very heartfelt big thank you to Aparna for accepting our invitation at such a short notice and agreeing to do this masterclass. Over to you, Aparna.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sharda, and thank you to Population First. Thank you to Anuja from UNFPA also for suggesting my name for this. And I think wherever I get invitation to talk to non-mental health professionals about mental health, I think I'm always delighted because my mission is to talk to not only those who are converted, but I see mental health is everybody's issue. And I think post COVID now we have realized that we can't afford to ignore it anymore. And hence I was very happy to accept this. I appreciate everybody who has joined this on a Saturday evening. I know lives are busy. There are so many things to do on Saturday evening, and yet you have chosen to be a part of this conversation. I think that's very, very important. So with this, this is how I'm thinking. I'll talk about 40 to 45 minutes, covering some of the points that Sharda has talked about, and then we will have some kind of a dialogue, questions and answers, whatever you wish to call it. So just give me 1 second. I'm an academician, so I always prefer to have some kind of a slide in front of me. I think that gives me some kind of a structure. So hopefully, and I think it helps me to share some important facts and data points also with all of you. So hopefully you are able to see my slides. Just this is the outline and exactly what Sharda said. I was given as a brief to cover in this class. First thing is, I think everybody thinks that they know about mental health, but it is my job as a mental health professional as well as an academician to clarify some concepts and give you a snapshot of some of the data points or realities of how mental health looks like in a country like India, which is a prototypical example of a low and middle income country. Then I think the most important topic, why is it that we need to talk about mental health to journalists or anybody who is interested in journalism? Why is it such a significant issue? I'm definitely focusing on journalist mental health, and I was surprised to see that there is very little research which exists in India on this topic. A lot of research is available in terms of first person accounts or journalists writing about themselves, but academicians seem to be quite unenthusiastic about researching. So whatever research is available globally and in India, I'm bringing some of the commonly seen stressors and their mental health impact on journalists. And of course, I mean, no conversation is okay, just raising problems, but not moving towards solutions and possibilities. And I'm hoping to do that through today's masterclass, that what can we do in order to address this? And given that I have such a fantastic audience with me, I want to end this masterclass by talking about some of the important practices of accountability and how can we responsibly report about mental health issues. Because as Sharda said, all of us have a very important role, and journalists have played a very, very important role in creating awareness as well as destigmatizing mental health and starting conversations about that. So let me first start with some of the mental health concepts and realities in India. I have tried to bring a lot of pictures because all of you are adult listeners, and it's very difficult to hold somebody's attention for a very long time if I just bring boring text to you. So this on the right hand side is a definition given by the World Health Organization. It's one of the most popular definitions of mental health. I've just tried to do some fun with it and build it into some smaller blocks so that it's easy to understand. So WHO definitely talks about mental health not as mental disorder or not as just absence of mental illness. But in fact, mental health is defined in a more positive way in terms of ability to function, ability to cope with everyday stressors, ability to perhaps have healthy relationships in your life. Doesn't mean that you won't have fights, you won't have conflicts, but are you able to hold some healthy relationships in your life? Do you have a sense of meaning? Do you have a sense of purpose? And sometimes we may be lost in our life. We may think, why am I doing what am I doing? But overall, do you have a sense of meaning? Something drives you largely in your life. And two other things related to this is whatever potential each one of us have. Some of us can sing well, some of us can write well, some of us can perceive well, some of us can critique well, some of us can give good solutions. Whatever abilities you have, do you realize, do you try to optimize your potentials and apart from taking care of your own self-interest and self-well-being, are you able to give back to the community also? If all of these or some of these building blocks are present in one person, then perhaps you can say that you have achieved mental health to some degree, right? That's the definition. And having said that, WHO is also very, very clear that the definition of mental health may change from context to context, culture to culture, but more or less these are the categories that come under the definition of mental health. And on the left hand side, I've just put a diagram of mind because mind is a very, very abstract concept. For example, all of us know how a train looks like, but we don't know. We can't see journey. We know how a watch looks like, but we can't see time. Similarly, we can feel mind, but we can't see mind, but it's very much there. And typically, psychologists define mind through four components. One is your thoughts, second is your emotions, your body also is very well connected with our mind, and the way you behave. These four actually put together can be called human mind. Right? So far we have talked about mental health, we have talked about what is mind. Uh, just building a vocabulary around mental health. If typically you ask anybody, a lay person, what is mental health, it is synonymized or equated always with mental illness and mental disorders. And anybody who talks about mental health unfortunately says that no, I won't talk about mental health because there is so much of stigma and it's equated with mental illness. And people are busy proving that they are not quote unquote mad. And that's one of the commonest understanding of mental health. That's the one of the interpretations of mental health, right? It's very difficult for us to say that am I 100% of the time mentally healthy or I could be anywhere on the dimension, and I will talk about that. But very important for us to understand mental disorder is just one aspect of mental health. I gave you a definition of mental health. There are several positive constructs related to mental health which are often very minimally written, sadly, and that is called subjective well-being, a quality of life, or coping. Coping is nothing but essentially whenever there are demands of life that exceed your resources, how is it that you deal with that imbalanced ratio is known as coping. There is resilience, your ability to bounce back in the wake of some difficult life situations. There is resistance. How can people give back in the wake of oppression and maintain their dignity, respect, as well as their well-being? Nowadays, particularly after India has signed what we call a CRPD, United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, mental health is also equated with actually psychosocial disability. We may have a disorder, but my disorder, my depression, my anxiety will become a disability when I live in a society which is unfortunately not accommodative of my impairment. Let me give you a small example. A person who is diagnosed with depression and is taking antidepressants. Typically, you know that it creates drowsiness, but the world around me is organized in a manner where you have to report at office at 9 o'clock and therefore I may have depression, but because the environment is not very, very friendly, my impairment may actually create a disability within me. So these are all the concepts related to mental health. And again, after this masterclass, I'm happy to provide as many readings based on whatever today I'm talking about. But it's good to familiarize ourselves about when I write about mental health, what aspect of mental health am I writing about? Am I writing about negative aspects such as disorders, stigma, or am I writing about positive aspects also? And am I writing in a rights based framework? Prior to 2017 in our country, mental health was not considered through a rights based framework, whereas we have a law today which is called Mental Health Care Act, and it's a rights based act. So today mental health is not a welfare charity issue, it is everybody's right definitely in this country. The next concept that I want to introduce related to mental health is mental health needs to be understood as a continuum. Earlier, people talked about it as a discrete model. There are some people who are mentally healthy, and there are some people who are not mentally healthy. And everybody was busy proving that they are mentally healthy. Whereas today, mental health is understood as a continuum. And we could be lying anywhere throughout our life journey, anywhere on this continuum. To give you a very small example, you may start your day with a very, very positive mental health. You have rested well, you have slept well, you have had a fantastic evening the previous day, a productive day at your work, and you wake up with positive mental health. But as you sort of start navigating through traffic or your train journeys, maybe you start feeling a sense of irritability or some kind of an anxiety to reach. You start thinking about the work that you need to finish, and you reach office and you see piles and piles of files on your table, and your mental health from positive mental health can slowly move towards stress. And if stress is far more chronic, then it can become distress. But if you can take help, if you can take support, if you do healthy coping, if you show resilience, you can go back to positive mental health also. So moral of the story being that you can shift anywhere. People who have even mental disorder can go back to positive mental health. And it's therefore important to look at it as a continuum, and people shifting anywhere on this continuum based on the stressors that they experience, the support that is available, and their coping also. Why is it important to talk about mental health globally as well as in India? I have got I think some of the policy makers and people who deal with hard facts understand numbers better, and hence I thought of bringing some numbers here. So if you look at it, 970 million people are living with mental disorders in the whole world. And if you look at it, this is a very, very underestimated number because very few people report mental health and very few people reach mental health services where they will receive any kind of a diagnosis given the stigma, lack of availability of services. Suicide is a very, very big issue everywhere. And India, unfortunately, leads. It is the suicidal number one ranking country in the whole world. Unfortunately, mental health is not just a disorder, but it has a real life impact whereby it accounts for 1 in 6 years of people lived with disability. And despite its huge burden, governments anywhere in the world spend about 2% of their health budgets. And if you look at India, India's health budget is 5% of its GDP, and our budget is not even 2%. So there is a huge demand for mental health services or mental health support, but huge gap in terms of the response also. And here are a few figures from India. Almost, this is a number which I'm quoting from 2017 Lancet article, whereas the number has actually increased to 200 million people in India who are suffering from mental disorders were diagnosed. If you add people who are not diagnosed or who are experiencing some kind of distress but not reaching diagnosis, the number is going to swell up tremendously. If you look at the number of suicides in India, almost 1.6 to 1.7 lakh people die by suicide, and young people unfortunately top in terms of suicide statistics in India. If you look at the gender dynamics of suicide in India, women attempt much more, but men die by suicide much more for the simple reason they have greater access to lethal means, and therefore completion of suicide ratio is higher. But if you look at young people's suicide, one of the topmost reason, and this data is maintained by National Crime Record Bureau, if you look at one of the leading reasons for suicide among young people, it is family conflicts, or it is frustration about career aspiration, educational aspirations. All of these are preventable reasons for suicide, and yet young people are dying by suicide in this very country. If you look at treatment gap, it is 70 to 92%, which means 70 to 92% people who are in need of mental health services do not have access to mental health services, and majority of the mental health services that exist in India are biomedical in nature. They are more in terms of medical interventions, but psychological interventions, social interventions, group interventions, residential interventions are very far and few. Majority of the mental health services are unfortunately saturated in the southern states, and the state from which I speak, Maharashtra, is not very well known for its mental health initiatives. And the high population of mental health services in southern states is also because NIMHANS was and has been present over there. Whatever is available, also there are issues of accessibility, affordability, quality. But having said that, among all low and middle income countries globally, India actually is an exemplary pioneer in terms of some of our programs, some of our policies, and some of our laws. I was just listening to when you were introducing yourself, you were saying that it's very important for all of you to first understand what's happening in the mental health landscape. And maybe this is just a quick course on this mental health landscape, so that if you wish to quickly peruse these documents, you know what to look for also. So, compared to any other country in the low and middle income country group, India was one of the first to have introduced a national mental health program in 1982. And district mental health program, national mental health program, unfortunately was introduced for the whole country. Soon they realized that it's not materializing. So they chose district as a smaller unit to pilot and to actually create some kind of a template. Today, if you look at it, the government of India claims that 700 districts in India have been covered by district mental health program, where mental health is integrated into the primary healthcare services, where the doctors are trained, nurses are trained, multi-purpose workers are trained, and yet at the district level, there is a team of specialists, including psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, so that at least there is help available at the doorstep. And for more severe forms, you can go perhaps to the district mental health program. The last I heard, we have 45 mental hospitals, and now the number must have increased to about 50 mental hospitals in India. So these mental hospitals typically are residential facilities where long-term, chronic, severe mental illness people are housed. There are several programs in India which are not related to mental health, but which have a component on mental health. For example, the adolescent mental health program called RKSK, the school health program, under 2018 program, Ayushman Bharat. Actually, health and wellness clinics were introduced, and these clinics also have a component on mental health. And we have one-stop centers which are addressing issues of violence against women, and they also have a component on mental health. These are programs, and after COVID, India has introduced a very, very ambitious tele-mental health program called Telemanas, which has a coverage of national level. So if at all you need to refer somebody, please make sure that you know Telemanas's number, because this is a government service, it's free, it's confidential, it's multilingual, and most importantly, it'll actually connect you to services all over the country. In terms of policies, we are a very strange country. Usually policy precedes program, but first we started with the program, and in 2014 we had the policy. Till that time, some states like Gujarat had created their own state mental health policy. But in 2014, we created our first national mental health policy, and it's a very, very progressive policy. Do read. It does talk about intersectionality. It does talk about vulnerability. It does talk about marginality. And it does talk about a psychosocial angle also, which is often missing from mental health discourse. 2024, the Health Ministry actually launched National Suicide Prevention Strategy, and sadly, very few journalists have written about it. So I take this platform to also invite journalists to actually study this strategy. Unfortunately, the government didn't create a big sort of awareness around this. But considering that we are the leading country in terms of suicide in the whole globe, we have to have a suicide prevention strategy. It's not a policy, but it's written as a strategy come policy document in 2024, and it's worth looking at it. In terms of legal frameworks, there are two very, very impressive laws that India has seen post 2016. Because we signed the UNCRPD, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, mental health or psychosocial disability is acknowledged as one of the 21 disabilities which are listed in Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, and 6 or 7 of those are related to mental health. So this is a very, very progressive act. It talks about giving rights to people, exemption from income tax, reservation in educational institutions or work, or many other opportunities in terms of affirmative action also. And in 2017, now it's an act. In 2018, we have a Mental Health Care Act. For the first time in the country, this act has decriminalized suicide. It has given a right to person with lived experience of mental illness to decide what kind of treatment they want, or if they don't want a treatment at all. But the person who is suffering was the least of our concern in India's mental health. But now that is the person who is empowered, and the person has a right to nominate who is it that should make decision making on their behalf about their mental health, to write a living will also. It is known as advance directive. You can write about your living will about how is it that you wish to be treated if at all you are a person with mental illness. So this was just a little bit about mental health landscape, some of the key concepts and some of the key documents that you should be familiar with. Now let me come to the most important topic for which I'm here, which is why is it that I need to talk to journalists or anybody who is interested in journalism about mental health, right? And I'm trying to bring as much as data as possible over here. So journalists, as Sharda said, in India have played a very, very significant role in writing about this otherwise stigmatized topic. And now I see a lot of articles not about mental health in general, but mental health about vulnerable populations. For example, young people, women, or LGBTQI community, or perhaps Muslim people, or perhaps, people from particular regions, or some other hidden populations which were marginalized communities and were never on the media map. So I think journalists have played a fabulous role in doing all of this. And I want to talk about one of the significant contributions by journalism around an incident that took place in Badusa district in Tamil Nadu in August 2001 called Ervadi incident. Right? This was a place where many people used to come. It was a traditional healing dargah for actually healing from mental illnesses. And this was the day, unfortunately, where 24 people who came to this dargah were chained and put in smaller tents as part of their healing rituals. And unfortunately, the very day they came, the dargah and those tents caught fire and all of them died at instance. And this was covered by media, and therefore Supreme Court took notice of it, actually gave directives to all states. Similarly, mental health coverage of mental institutions in India, and tremendous contribution by media to actually talk about human rights violations, to talk about stigma around mental health. So very, very important that journalists need to talk about it. But unfortunately, if you look at journalists' mental health, and I'm going to do this in two parts. One is journalists' mental health. What are some of the solutions, and what can journalists do to talk about mental health also? So I was just reading about what is happening to journalists' mental health. And if you typically, anybody who has been journalist will identify with everything that I'm talking about. Very high pressure, high job demand. And I was reading through this systematic review. A systematic review is a compilation of many studies actually. And this was one of the first global systematic review which talked about journalists' mental health, their stressors and their coping. And it's a compilation of 28 articles. So it's covering a huge sort of a database. And it talks about host of stressors. I'll list some of those stressors also. And the impact of this stress is unfortunately has been consistently negative, and yet mental health of the journalist is not talked about. There are far and few studies from India also that talk about it, not much literature, but again, the negative mental health impact of journalists related stressors has been already covered, and hence it is very, very important to talk about it. So, what are some of the common stressors that all of these articles are talking about? And I'm sure I'm not a journalist. Let me just clarify right at the beginning. So, I think you know much more about the field and its intricacies. I'm just trying to do this on the basis of media coverages that I have read. I have had, I'm also a practicing psychotherapist, so I've had some clients who have been journalists, and I've had some interactions with journalists also, but I'm not a journalist. I wanted to give you that caveat right at the beginning. So very, very high pressure to be game on face. When I was talking to Yogesh, the director of Population First, he said, headline and deadline is the tagline of media. So you have to be the first, you have to perform consistently in live formats. There is perhaps no retake also. You have to deal with constant flow of information, and you also have to constantly adjust to changing technologies, shifting realities. Particularly freelancers have shown that you have to sell a story to pay the bills, and you have to shift the plans quickly to adapt to sudden processes. Right? Time pressure, long hours, high levels of unpredictability, needing to be always ready, little opportunity for failure. And I'm going to talk about how the discourse about how to be a journalist actually is not an intellectual pursuit. It is internalized lot many times by journalists, and it doesn't become a discourse. It remains my self-definition, unfortunately, and that produces layers of mental health impacts also. So little opportunity for failure or to make up for mistakes, high mental load, and the daily grind of covering conflicts, wars. I think everyday pressures are definitely themselves quite demanding, but covering trauma, covering crime, covering violence has additional layers of mental health impacts also. And apart from all of this, there are economic uncertainties and worries that plague journalists on everyday basis. While all journalists are definitely vulnerable to mental health stressors, there are certain research shows or literature shows that there are certain subgroups of journalists who are more vulnerable to developing mental health issues. So that's why I've called those vulnerabilities within vulnerabilities. And women journalists are very important example who have to struggle in a male-dominated world, and gender bias and discrimination, the nature of work, what kind of news coverage they are given, more softer kind of sectors rather than harder sectors such as politics and crime, perhaps. They have to deal with unequal pay, offline and online harassment. This is a global survey done by UNESCO, and I think it was published around 2015 or 17. I'm happy to share some of these also with you later on. And 73% of women journalists actually talked about experiencing online violence in the form of hate speech or trolling or sexual harassment or stalking or being sent some kind of unwanted messages of sexual nature. And 20% of those who admitted to having faced online violence also talked about them being followed in offline world by same people and being attacked in offline world also. So the you can see the blurring of the violence when it comes to offline and online worlds and the continuities that exist between the two also. And when these women journalists were asked how has it impacted their mental health, they typically talked about self-censorship because they were not very hopeful for support coming from outside, unfortunately. They talked about withdrawal from frontline reporting or public conversations online, and many talked about actually having a wish or having executed the decision to leave the field also. So the impacts can be that devastating on women journalists. Women journalists have also talked about mental health toll because of having to maintain work-life balance. And one of the important contributing factors to their stressors is dearth of female representation in leadership positions. which actually makes them believe that perhaps there is a glass ceiling and I'll never be able to reach my potential or my aspirations also. Some of the other vulnerable groups within journalists that could be possibly at the helm of mental health negative impacts are journalists from minority groups, young and novice journalists who may be very, very enthusiastic, very well meaning, risk taking, want to cover very, very challenging situations, but unfortunately unprepared in terms of how to deal with trauma, not having adequate support system, not having adequate conversations around mental health, and therefore severely getting impacted. And there are articles after articles written about freelance journalists being another vulnerable community within journalists who are particularly vulnerable to developing mental health impacts, right? So why is it that still journalists are continuing to be, I mean, I was really looking at where are the rewards in this field. And if you look at it, I mean, these are some of the rewards why people continue despite this is their resistance, this is their coping, this is their resilience also, that the opportunity to meet exciting people or exciting kind of situations, lifelong learning, the freedom, autonomy, the ability to control my own career, several perks, and most importantly, meeting like-minded people, having a desire to contribute, to change, to impact the world is something which keeps journalists actually continue. Having talked about the stressors that typically journalists encounter, I wanted to talk about what is the impact of some of these stressors on, and I really hope that as I'm showing these slides, this is not just a material that I'm sharing, but I hope each one of us is putting ourselves through this conversation and seeing, hey, where do I lie in terms of my own mental health also? Because I think identification of one's own vulnerability is the first step towards taking any steps in the direction of positive mental health, right? So as I said, that mind comprises of four things: your thoughts, your emotions, your behaviors, as well as your body. And typically, if you look at Indian context, mental health may not be understood by people through emotional or thought channels, but through bodily channels. Research from South Asia typically shows that South Asian communities talk about mental health through bodily symptoms such as migraines, bodily aches and pains, heaviness, because language of physical complaints is far more acceptable, less stigmatized and legitimized in South Asian countries as against language of emotionality, language of thoughts. So, are you facing any of these unexplainable stress related symptoms also? And please remember that this is the brain model, you know, this is our thinking brain and this is our emotional brain. When we are particularly dealing with a stressful situation, my thinking brain and my emotional brain is not connected. I start reacting through only my emotional brain, and many of it will get registered only in my body. Not necessarily it is storied and therefore put as a narrative in my own world also. So look at your body. Has it changed? Have your sleep patterns changed? Has your appetite changed? Are there panic symptoms? Are there heaviness, aches, pains? Or has your mood changed? It could be what we call as hyperarousal, which means high anxiety, high anger, high irritability, or hyperarousal, which means a lot of people tell me, and I've heard this from journalists also, that I don't feel anything. I feel numb. I feel completely detached. Now, it's very important to differentiate, is it a coping strategy which is done through self-conscious attempts, or is it that your mind is giving you signs that perhaps you are negatively impacted mentally through this encounter, right? Typical thoughts like I can't fail, maybe you may not have ability to decide. Your worldview also as a journalist can get completely shattered, may not be able to trust people, may not be able to see anything positive in this world, may feel that the world is dark, what's the use, what's the purpose? So cognitions can also change and your behaviors can also change. Maybe you are socially withdrawn or you feel the need to connect too much socially, or you're crying endlessly, or your productivity. Many people understand the mental health impact largely through their productivity. That I used to work for those many hours, or I used to write these many articles, I used to cover so many stories, but now I don't feel like my productivity has gone down, or you're engaging in some kind of unhealthy, unhelpful, let me call this coping mechanisms also. I think keep for some look out for some signs of burnout. I'm happy to share this. I'm happy to share some small self-rating questionnaires for us to understand that do I need to talk about this? Do I need some kind of help? Right? And if you don't take care of that stress, then typically literature shows what are the mental disorders which are commonly seen in journalists, and those are what we call as common mental disorders, which means they are commonly seen and they are far more compared to severe mental disorders such as schizophrenia or bipolar affective disorder, which is one among 100 people. Whereas depression, anxiety are more commonly seen, anywhere between 7 to 14% in any community in India. So there could be depression, there could be anxiety, there could be panic attacks or substance abuse. Lot of literature talks about journalists coping, or it could be a part of lifestyle also, through substance abuse or other behavioral addictions such as internet addiction, social media addictions also, right? It could be related to trauma, it could be related to burnout. And I also wanted to introduce some concepts also here, that if you are a journalist who is constantly covering stories of trauma, crime, violence, then typically watch out for what is known as secondary trauma, which means when you come home, you are not able to switch off. You carry those stories, you have those images in your mind constantly, you feel either numb or constantly you are hyper vigilant, which means in your normal everyday conversations with your family also, you're constantly watching for some kind of attack or some kind of thing to go wrong. You may have terrible dreams, you may have terrible imagery also. And if it continues, if seriously you don't take care of yourself, your cognitive schemas, which means your lens of looking at world, can become very, very negative, and that can have very, very devastating sort of consequences, and hence very, very important to talk about mental health of journalists. I was interested in knowing, how do journalists cope with all of these stressors? What do they do? And do they seek help? Because all research consistently nowadays shows that journalists are far more positive when it comes to covering mental health. But research shows that journalists are not so proactive in terms of accessing help for their own mental health. They suggest mental health help seeking for other people, but they are not, unfortunately, at the forefront of seeking mental health, right? So let's look at what are the ways in which journalists cope, and these are also extensive studies done across different countries. So one of the strategies that journalists use is avoidance strategies. Don't think about it, don't face, don't talk, or use black humor or dark humor. Given their linguistic prowess, I think, or the communities that they work with, perhaps, this is considered as an acceptable strategy of coping also. Try to control emotions, and I'm going to talk about some of the discourses. I don't think there is space for vulnerability, there is space for failure, there is space for faltering in this world, and therefore control of emotions and memories and detachment and the building a steel heart or an iron fist is the strategy through which people try to deal with it. Using substances or behavioral addiction has been shown to be one of the ways. There are some positive ways in which journalists do cope, which is through exercise, physical activities, or through talking about trauma or talking about the emotions. Journalists also try to maintain their hope, optimism by reminding themselves about why is it that I went into journalism, right? What was my original motivation, mission? And that's how they continue to fuel, that's how they continue to motivate themselves. And some people cope by just focusing on practical and mechanical aspects and not engaging with the trauma, emotions, or the details or the grotesque nature of the news that they are covering. So you can see some of these are constructive strategies, while not everything is constructive, and it may add to your mental health woes rather than actually help you come out of it. In terms of help seeking, I was trying to understand that why is it that so many journalists are suffering and yet they are not taking help. So if you typically see, the demanding and the challenging nature of work environment itself brings some predictability, and therefore taking help on a consistent basis may become challenging. There are rigid organizational norms, and in terms of solutions, I wanted to say that It is not individual person's responsibility to take care of their mental health. Maybe what we call in systems language second order change at a larger systems level also. Something needs to change on an urgent basis for journalists to feel safe, valued, visible, and definitely mentally healthy also. So a lot of rigid organizational norms and discourses that stigmatize conversations about mental health, personal mental health in newsroom, encouraging culture of silence, stigma surrounding mental health. And it's so interesting, the journalists write about destigmatizing mental health, but within the world of journalism, there is a lot of stigma about talking about mental health, right? There is a constant demand for game face on, right? Haunted by an always on kind of a mentality where there is no space for pausing, no space for halting, faltering, and emotionality. And all of this is the culture which may discourage vulnerability, further preventing journalists and therefore exacerbating their work related stress and personal stress also for that matter. So this is the landscape of India and mental health, and this is the landscape of journalists and their mental health. And I will take just a few minutes to talk about what are some of the solutions, because it will just create some kind of a negative energy in this room if I don't talk about some of the possible solutions. And I'm happy to share some of the global projects that have been done in other countries. Later on, I can share information about that also. And if any one of you here is inspired to take a lead on creating some solutions also for this huge problem that exists, right? I always say that the first step towards making any change in the direction of mental health is to identify and accept vulnerability. If you hide vulnerability, if you put your game face on, if you say headlines and deadlines is my world, if you say that I'm neutral and detached, if you constantly demand for yourself that I have to stay in control, I have to stay ahead, I have to stay ahead in the competition, or I have to be perfect and popular. These are the actually cognitions that I've picked up from literature that are typically seen among journalists. And instead say, let me be, right? And if you can accept that something is amiss in my mind, body, thoughts, my behaviors, and I need help, that's step number one. It's very, very important that journalists, and there are some good guidelines for journalists as to how can they take care of their mental health before, during, and after covering particularly traumatic events. Because journalists who cover trauma news, Sharda talked about her colleague who covered tsunami. And today, I think, unfortunately, we are living in a world which is becoming more and more polarized, more and more violence, legitimization of violence also. And hence, very, very important to identify common triggers or common situations and be somewhat prepared. Maybe let other people know where you are going, create some kind of protection plan. And it can't be one person's responsibility, it has to be organization or team's responsibility to do that. Otherwise you are privatizing mental health, and you are saying self-care is self's responsibility and victim blaming. Maybe during and after job also, what are some of the self-care rituals? And remember that self-care is like an oxygen mask that you have to have with you all the time. A lot of people practice self-care only after or during crisis. Self-care is like hygiene. You don't exercise after you gain weight. You have to exercise so that you don't gain weight and you stay fit. So self-care is an ongoing practice, and you cannot excuse by saying I don't have time for that. Do you have debriefs after you have come back, or do you put your next game phase on phase, or do you go on to your next task? It's very important to understand the value of catharsis. You need to have your own team. And if you can't do that, you need to reach out for help also. There are different techniques which are available on the job, such as grounding techniques, which can be done no matter where you are, on a chair, no matter how much noise is around you, within 3 minutes also. And those are simple techniques that you can do to ground yourself, to bring yourself, your arousal down. There is more to life than news. I think very important reminder constantly being given to yourself. And lean on your village. Who is your village? Who is your camaraderie? Who is your team? Who are your companions? Who are your support networks? I think journalists are today reporting feelings of isolation more and more, leading to feelings of sadness, hopelessness, despair, and hence very important to stay connected. And organizations like, for example, Population First are doing already a fabulous job of bringing journalists together on one platform, connecting, creating these networks. Very, very important. And when self-care or social care fails, you need to have health care, you need to go to professionals, and very, very important, without feeling stigmatized. I'll skip these. I will be happy to share some of these slides also with you. But apart from individual self-care, I also wanted to suggest some second order or systemic level solutions. And unfortunately, India is not great in terms of executing some of these systemic solutions. For example, it is very, very mandatory that trauma training or training on mental health is provided in journalism schools and newsrooms also. This was a fantastic survey, which was a very recent survey, whereby 41 journalist schools and their head of the institutions were reviewed in USA and were asked, how is it that you talk about trauma in your schools and in your course? And very few, actually, rather one said that they integrate conversations around trauma and mental health in their curriculum. So I think you need to start from the beginning, and the conversations cannot happen once you have already established yourself. But while you are in the process of making as a journalist, I think very important to introduce. Offer peer support, a number to call, and I'm going to give iCall's number also. But during COVID, it was very interesting that many journalists and media professionals in TV industry or film industry approached iCall, a service that I run, and said, can you start a helpline for us? Right? So at least COVID was one place where, and unfortunately they never came back. Everybody felt motivated, but it never reached fruition. But I just wanted to say that very important that some dedicated resources, very, very important, and journalists and organizations should allow some time off, especially when you have covered some very, very challenging trauma-based or violence-based or crime-based kind of a news, right? It's also very important to create some booklets, information material. For example, I have listed one such material, Trauma in Journalism, a Practical Guide, created by DART Center. There is a API, American Press Institute, created entire directory of resources, and it's a fabulous, authentic, trustworthy directory of resources. So please consult. I think we need to write about all of this in regional languages in a country like India, which is so multilingual, and let this be known to journalists also. Train newsroom managers also to talk about trauma. Many journalists have actually talked about a phenomenon called institutional betrayal, that they feel that their institutions fail them, and they fail them in terms of understanding their vulnerability, understanding the mental health impact, and they do not support them. So very, very important to not keep the responsibility of taking care of one's own mental health on journalists, but also create some workplace environment and addressing the inequities, discrimination, and power imbalances that exist in the world of journalism. So with this, I just wanted to lastly say that I hope my message is loud and clear, that this is a community which is in dire need of support, and hopefully somebody feels motivated after today's masterclass to do something and start somewhere. Right? I started by saying that taking this class because journalists have played a very, very pioneering role in terms of talking about mental health conversations. So it is also very important to teach journalists to talk about mental health in a responsible and accountable manner. Here is one of the latest publications, and it's an academic publication, which looked at, this is an Indian publication, by the way. It looked at media portrayal of mental illness, and 273 news reports were perused in order to look at the results. Results show that impressively, more than 50% of the news items were positive in nature, and yet nearly third had a stigmatizing tone. They portrayed mentally ill people. Nobody uses a language called mentally ill people, mentally challenged people, mentally or mentally retarded people. These are languages of colonial times, and we haven't upgraded ourselves to understand what language to use also, right? So they had also portrayed people with mental illness as violent, unreliable, incapable, unpredictable. All research in the world shows that people who are so-called normal and healthy are far more violent towards each other and towards people with mental illness than people with mental illness towards people who are not mentally ill, right? So these arguments are baseless. They are unfortunately not consulted with research studies. A use of blanket terms, I have talked about it. Overall, Hindi media had a significantly better quality of reporting than the English language media, which is a very, very interesting finding for me. And national media reports had a less negative and stigmatizing tone than local articles. And I call through our conversations, and I will talk about I call. I have had several conversations with journalists in terms of asking them, how do you cover news items related to mental health and particularly related to sensationalizing topics such as suicide, right? So I know that today, for example, some of the leading houses, both print as well as television media, will carry ICAL's number while covering the news on mental health and suicide. And I had to do a lot of advocacy to reach there. So I wanted to say that you are in the best position to actually talk about this. Here are a few terms. Today, our laws have decriminalized suicide. So please don't use a language like committed suicide. Simply say died by suicide, successful suicide. It's almost like, how usually if you live, you are successful. You don't die and then you are not successful. So I think even language around suicide is very, very important. And I'm happy to share this. WHO actually has released a resource guide for media professionals and it's updated in 2017 to talk about suicide. And it's one of the most circulated document by WHO for media professionals. So please read about it. Here are a few tips to remember: that evaluate the newsworthiness. Remember, there is always a contagion effect when you are covering stories of mental health and suicide, which means that if you cover the story irresponsibly, without creating hope, without talking about support and solution, there are many people who are going to get affected by it and will try to actually follow a similar kind of behavior. So very, very important that you do, particularly when there are celebrity suicide or celebrity mental health issues. We have seen all countries have noted a surge in suicide attempts as well as death by suicide. So evaluate the impact of what you are reporting. Suicide reporting should preferably be done by health reporters, or if crime reporters are doing that, then they have to be trained how to report about that. Attempt to suicide is not a crime in this country, so please do not promote it like that. And focus on suicide prevention along with help seeking and alternatives. You cannot, WHO says you cannot print a suicide related story without giving resources to people. So I hope that you will cover more about media, about mental health in media. This is a service that I run. I just wanted to talk about this. You can promote this service among other people. You can also avail of this service on your own. I teach at Tata Institute of Social Sciences, but I also run this service called iCall, which is started since 2010. It's one of the leading national level mental health psychosocial counseling service. It's completely confidential, completely anonymous. Our counselors speak 8 to 10 different languages. You can talk for as long as you want. You can talk as many times as you want. We are not going to ask you what is your name. If you don't want to talk to us, you can email us. If you don't want to email us, you can chat with us. So with this, I just wanted to definitely once again thank Population First and UNFPA for inviting me here. And I just wanted to say that hopefully my talk has motivated some of you to take care of your own mental health as well as talk about mental health in media in a responsible manner. Yeah.
Sharda, you're on mute.
Thank you, Aparna. It's so very insightful. I learned a lot, and I have got a lot of program ideas from your, lecture, masterclass. We'll definitely look at including, some sessions on trauma management in journalism colleges. Let's work on it together. That will be really very useful, and yeah, we need your support for that, and I'm looking forward to that. And yep, now it's open for questions or comments. Or well, Anuja, would you like to say something before we open it for Q&A?
Not really, but very, very insightful. I myself learned a lot. And, bang on certain points that you gave on addressing mental health issues, amongst journalists, like self-care, normalizing conversations around this, having conversations at the workplace, and, whenever required, reaching out to experts. I think that was really, really very, very, very useful. And I'm sure while we all know this, we tend to forget it, in our daily routine and our daily lives. So I think that was something which was very, very important and useful. And just one little thing, I think we also need to, understand, and specifically when you talked of women journalists, uh, trying to address what would be the root causes of the stressors, uh, I'm so sorry. I thought I have, this just went off. What would be the root causes of the stressors? Is it the discrimination that we're facing at our workplace? We don't have, like you said, many women journalists who are at top levels. We have several women journalists at the entry and the mid level. So is it bullying? Is it the kind of, the beats that women are given? So all of those, and I think very, very critical points raised by you. And very important what Sharda mentioned. We will try and include these issues as part of our training for media persons going forward, media and communication professionals going forward. So thank you so much.
And I just wanted to respond to what Anuja said. Very, very important. In fact, I read an article, and I'm happy to share that the I forgot it. It's NW, some collective of women journalists India that put it
NWMI.
together, and yeah, and they actually released a document talking about what needs to change at the root cause for women journalists to feel safe and
Yeah.
yeah.
Any questions? Pooja, are there any questions in the chat box?
Yeah, there's one question from Ningloon. She's saying, on personal front, like when I feel low, does it also mean that the biological health is also weak? In the sense, I am in menopause. I have also heard that feeling low of some level of depression is normal. So it is about our overall health also that makes us feel low at times.
No, thank you very much. I'm just trying to pronounce her name correctly.
Ningloon.
Minglun, yeah.
Ninglu.
No, you are absolutely right that mind and body are so connected, and particularly in terms of women, it has been shown that their reproductive health is also very closely connected with their mental health. Uh, Feeling low could be a part of body, it could be a part of mental health also, but greater conversation is very much required around that. Um, while we say that this is normal, women also have what we call mental health practitioners call understandability phenomenon, that this is understandable, it happens in my life, I'm a woman, I'm in my menopausal stage, and therefore, but it's very important to talk to some expert to understand that does it fit in the normal kind of this thing, or it is important perhaps to seek help or to do something about it also. Just wanted to flag that so that it's not put on the back burner. Yeah.
Guys, come on, you please, you will never get an opportunity to talk to Aparna, again soon. So if you have any questions, any observations, if you want to say something nice to her about her presentation, please come forward and say it.
Ma'am, may I please? Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
please.
yeah. Hi, my name is Pratyay. I work with Cry. So it's a really thought-provoking and it's a great take-home, I mean, lessons what uh, Aparna ma'am shared. My question is like, while we write things for children, the children's mental health related issues, other than the playbook you just provided, like what are the key other silver linings we should keep in mind to, I mean, actually focus more on the child's mental health issues and also our mental health issues as well. Like not me, I am writing, also the field level officials who are actually collating on our behalf some of the story nuances, and from there we actually write and draft the story, share with the press sometimes. So in this whole architecture, like the person who are collecting the story as well as from whom the child we are collecting the stories, like the silver linings, if you could actually shed light on that. Thanks, yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that you found some of what I said useful. And I mean, I will definitely look for specific resources about covering child mental health related news items, and I will be happy to share those also later on with you. But if I understood your question correctly, what are the considerations to keep in mind while covering stories of children and children's mental health also? And that entire architecture that you talked about, from person who is covering that story to somebody who is finally releasing that story, what needs to happen? I feel I can give you some general guidelines for sure. One is I feel that when you are covering stories of children, it's very important to keep in mind the developmental appropriateness of that story coverage also. So, for example, if you talk to children or talk about children in an adult like manner, but it doesn't suit their life stage and the language, the ways in which rapports are built, unfortunately, it can create re traumatization or negative effects of the entire interaction on children. So, very, very important. Children in this country can give only assent and not consent. So, very important that some trustworthy adults are also around them. But whenever we cover any negative story, media guidelines very clearly say that the story should also end at a hopeful note, because if the readers are reading stories of hopelessness one after, and if you open any news today, unfortunately there is a sensational value to hopelessness or some kind of exaggerated despair also. So if you don't talk about the strengths that that child might have shown, the resilience the family or the ecosystem might have shown, and also mention some resources, mention some support systems in your news item, then it is likely to have what is known as a contagion effect. It may create hopelessness for other children or stakeholders who work with the children also. So very, very important to remember these things. And I really hope that people who are covering these stories and till people who are releasing these stories are also well versed with children's world a little bit in terms of how to use a child friendly language, or sometimes there is identification also. The person who is covering that news may have children and may suddenly see your own children in the space of that child also. So I think even talking about these phenomena is also very, very important, so that people who are covering the news are also well aware, perhaps can identify triggers and protected also, and support can be offered. So these are the off the cuff kind of suggestions, but I'll definitely look at some resources and I'll be happy to share those.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll just put my email ID here, chat
Sure,
box. As per
sure,
your convenient, if you could share some, that would be great. I will be rightly
sure.
organized. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Sandhya has something to say, right?
Yeah, as a journalist, I have always followed switching off myself when I wanted to get away from an emotionally draining story like a war. Can you suggest some technology based solutions that can help us deal with emotional drain covering such stories? After all, we cannot shut ourselves for long.
I completely agree with you. Although I want to definitely, first of all, uh, say that this is a very, very constructive strategy that you found for yourself to take care of yourself. And I can perfectly understand that it is not possible to keep yourself away. But today there are so many technology based solutions which are available on your phone itself. And as I said, that they have simple grounding exercises, they give you simple watch on your mind also. How are you feeling right now? Mood checks, feeling checks, knowing are you in the hypoarousal or hyperarousal stage, how is your breathing, even simple checks like these. And there are fantastic apps. For example, there is an app called Headspace, which is actually created by Australia. In Australia, there is another UK based app called Calm, and all of these are, many features of these apps are actually free of cost, and some are later on paid apps. But definitely perhaps you could use technology based solutions to, but it requires some kind of discipline, mindfulness, to remind yourself that now I need to switch off my phone to look at news or to look at social media and actually look at mental health resources, because my mental health needs to be prioritized. So there are several solutions, and technology is the way to go. But having said that, I also wanted to say that online cannot ever replace offline. That is my favorite tagline. And therefore, hopefully, you have in personal life also a lot of support systems through whom you can talk. You don't have to, I mean, use your phone not to just text or watch, but also to talk to other people if you can't meet them in person. But it's difficult otherwise. So,
Yeah, I have found one app, Aparna, which is online journaling, and you write, your whatever, the regular thing, whatever you want to write, you share, and then that particular write-up is, commented or is looked at, and you get a philosopher, you get a psychologist, you get a, three, four different kinds of perspectives on what you're feeling. So it's an interesting app. I don't remember the name of the app now, but it really, like, it sort of distances you when you see it. It distances yourself from a particular incident, and you look at it as an outsider. And once you look at it as an outsider, most of the emotional baggage and most of the our personal responses, they get a little muted, and you're able to handle the situation much better. So I was using it for a short time out of curiosity, and I really found it helpful. Yeah.
yeah, no, thank you for sharing. And there are several such apps. And if you want to talk instantly to a counselor, iCall has a chat service. Please make
Mm.
use of that chat service. I'll be happy to share that service. It's completely free. Currently, it's in English. But if you want to write an email to us, you can write it in any language. You can use just an English script and write to us. You can write to us in English, and both those services are free of cost but run by professional counselors. So that option is also.
Aparna, maybe, yes, it's not using technology, but maybe one or two grounding techniques, if you could just share 5, 4, 3,
Sure,
2, 1 or
sure,
anything,
sure, sure, sure,
just
sure,
just inform
sure,
the
sure, sure.
community here.
Sure, sure. Definitely. I think two of the techniques that all of us can utilize while you are doing your work or anything of that sort. I won't demonstrate the technique, but at least I'll talk about those techniques. One is known as deep breathing. And typically, when we are covering difficult news, when we are going through difficult situations in our life, you will know that that part of our brain gets activated, which is ready to fight, flight, run away, or fright, freeze with anxiety, right? And constantly, that part of the brain will absolutely prepare us for any kind of adversity. So you will see that your hands are all, sort of ready, your pupils have dilated, and most importantly, your breathing is very fast and shallow. So very, very important to learn one simple way of managing your stress, which is you have put your hand on chest and another hand on your stomach. And if you were to do a deep breathing, you need to actually breathe through your nose so that your stomach comes out. And then you need to let go, exhale through your mouth. So when you inhale, your stomach comes out, and you exhale through your mouth and your stomach goes in. If you are breathing through your stomach, which means you are giving a signal to your body that you can rest, life is okay, you are in control. So deep breathing, if you want, I can give you a small video, and it's just a 2 or 3 minutes exercise. And another exercise that Anuja was talking about, one of the most popular grounding technique. Grounding is nothing. When we are in the midst of trauma and stress, our brain is fragmented. We don't know where we are. So in order to bring my mind back into the present, most of the time our mind is in future, thinking about worrisome scenario, or it is decoding past and talking to people and figures from the past. How do I bring myself into a calm present? Is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So simply you just sit at one quiet place wherever you are. If you don't have a quiet place, doesn't matter. You take out your glasses, you just put your feet on the ground and just reorient your attention to 5 things that you can see around yourself, 4 things perhaps that you can hear, maybe 3 things that you can, basically actually inviting all your senses to bring back into this world so that you feel calm. Remember, lot many times we don't have the resources to deal with our emotions and thoughts immediately, but we can calm our body immediately. So I will be happy to share these, and you can go to this website that I talked about, API, the American press information, I forgot whatever it is. It was API, and they have put together all the resources for journalists. I can share many such. The DART journalism report also has fantastic resources, very simple techniques. So nobody can complain that I don't have time for mental health. It is just a matter of will, frankly speaking, because these are very, very small exercises that you can do. Thank you,
There's one
Anuja.
more question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pooja? Yeah.
Abhijit is asking, how important is it in your view for Indian organizations to provide access to counselors or therapists as part of employee benefits? Additionally, how significant is it for organizations to formally include mental health support within their workplace policies to ensure sustained well-being for their employees?
Thank you very much. This is one of the million-dollar questions. And WHO during COVID actually released a report on workplace mental health. Sorry, I keep quoting information. I just want to make sure that I'm giving you right resources also. Please read that report. In fact, I think one of the mental health themes was dedicated to workplace mental health, and it is becoming really a big issue. And it is, we are very close to hopefully times when all organizations need to mandatorily provide EAP, what is known as Employee Assistance Program services to clients. ICOL provides some such services to many organizations, some of the leading organizations in India today. The idea is some part of your budget, basically you keep aside to tie up with a mental health organization which provides online mental health services. And many of these EAP services provide at least 5 or 6 free sessions to your employees. So this should be employees' right. When employees sign contract, they ask about work package, and within that this should be, and this is one of the strongest suggestion that has come from journalists themselves through quantitative and qualitative researches as to what needs to happen for their mental health, that they are saying don't leave self-care to self, leave it to organizational care. That can you integrate such small steps. And let me tell you that the budgets are not very high. It is about prioritizing journalists mental health. Or, and I have seen that when you start equating mental health with productivity, that's when organizations understand. Because if you actually provide for mental health of your journalists, you will have better news, you will have greater retention, you will have quality work also. And hence it is absolutely mandatory. I will be happy. I mean, ICOL is already providing, but no journalist organization has ever come to us and said that we want to provide, or media house has come to us and said that we want to provide EAP services. So if anybody wishes to do that, we have an entire template as to how this service is run. I think that's absolutely a need of the hour, urgently required. There are few people who are writing private messages to me. I'm not very sure whether I'm supposed to respond to those because those are privately written to me. So if you can just, without telling names, I'm happy to read those. If you can allow me, then I can perhaps, read out. Is it okay? Those who have said without telling your names, can I? Uh, because those questions are not related to your identity. So somebody has asked me that how is it that one can realize that one is going through some kind of mental health issue and one is depressed or anxious. And thank you very much for asking that question. That feeling depressed or feeling anxious is not equal to having depression and being diagnosed with anxiety. Those are two different things. In order to be able to say that I'm suffering from depression as a disorder, three or four things need to happen. One is it is tied with the frequency of your symptoms, it is tied with your severity of your symptoms, it's tied with, most importantly, the impact of this on your life. So everybody will feel anxious, everybody will feel depressed. There will be some days when you will feel on the top of the world, on some days you will feel completely very, very sad and blue, but doesn't mean that you are suffering from depression. But if you, I would suggest that it's a good idea to consult a practitioner. And if you consistently, frequently, severely, and impactfully, it is actually impacting your functionality. Very, very important to look at some kind of a professional help also. Uh, and organizations, for example, sorry, this question I'm not very sure about what is it. Uh, but basically, how employees need to be treated also very well. And I completely second this, that let's not privatize mental health. Let's not put the responsibility of self care on self. I feel that organizations need to take a responsibility and do something in this matter. Any other questions? I'm aware that we have exceeded the time. Sure, sure. I'll be happy to share these resources on India's mental health policy and strategy. What I can do is I can share, instead of sharing these resources with individuals, I can share it with Population First and UNFPA, and maybe then you have the list of participants. You could circulate that to the participants. Does that sound okay? Yeah.
Yes, yes. We would be very happy to do that.
Sure.
And so shall we wind up now or any more questions?
I think we can wind up.
Yeah, thanks, Aparna. It's really very helpful, and I hope it will lead to some good journalistic reporting, and it will also lead to many more journalists seeking help and acknowledging the problems that they are facing, and also at the institutional level, hope some changes come up soon. And as I told in the beginning, we are going to have a scholarship. We are going to announce fellowships for journalists to write on mental health issues. We'll share the details soon. And please keep in touch with us, and we will, we'll take this conversation forward.
Thank you very much for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to talk to a community which is not otherwise easily accessible to me. So I hope that this is just a beginning of the conversation and the road
Yes.
ahead is long. Yeah.
Yeah, we should work on it more, and I really look forward to collaborating with you.
Sure.
In
Thank you
future.
very much. Have a lovely evening and have a lovely weekend also. Thanks a lot.
Happy weekend to everyone. Bye.
Thank you.